JBN, we keep you informed. Double killing rocks Montego Bay. 2 men were killed in a car in Montego Bay shortly after leaving the examination depot yesterday afternoon. The dead men have been identified as Michael Anthony Hill, who lived in retirement, St. James and Old Harbour, St. Catherine, and a man known to the police as Kemar Hofstede of a Norwood, St. James address. Reports are that about 12 noon, Hill and Hofstede had just left the examination depot in Flanker and were traveling in a 1993 green Toyota Corolla along Claude Clark Avenue, Montego Bay, when gunshots were heard. Upon the arrival of the police, the men were found slumped in the bullet-riddled car with multiple gunshot wounds. According to information received, investigators removed more than 50 9mm spent shells from the crime scene. No motive has been established for the killing. Investigators from the Major Investigation Task Force are probing the killings. 2 killed in Steertown, St. Anne. The St. Anne police are investigating the circumstances that led to the deaths of 2 persons in Steertown on Wednesday. Information reaching us is that in the first incident, an unidentified body was found in an area of the community known as Capture. Later in the day, unknown assailants shot and killed a resident in the Bellevue area. The identity of the victim has not been ascertained. Steertown, which became a crime hotspot in recent years, has seen a decrease in violence in recent times following the implementation of social intervention initiative. Excop and sister lose appeal against conviction in murder of taxi operator. Excop Jeffrey Peart and his sister Roxanne have lost their appeal against their 2014 conviction for the murder of a taxi operator. In December 2014, the siblings were both sentenced to life in prison for the 2012 murder of Delroy Frame. The ex-cop was ordered to serve 35 years before he becomes eligible for parole, while his sister was ordered to serve 16 years. After 4 days of submissions by defense attorneys and the prosecutors, the appeal court upheld the convictions. However, the panel comprising Justice Patrick Brooks, Jennifer Straw, and Frank Williams decided to shave off 2 years from the mandatory prison time for the ex-cop to account for the time spent behind bars as he awaited trial. This means he will now have to serve 33 years before he may be released from prison. The judgment was handed down by Justice Brooks via Zoom. The appellants had challenged the DNA and ballistic evidence, as well as call data records presented by the prosecution. Jeffrey Peart's attorney, Gillian Burgess, contended that her client was given a sentence that is usually reserved for multiple counts and that he was in custody for 2 years before sentencing. The ex-cop was 26 years old at the time of sentencing. Roxanne, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, was given 18 years, but this was reduced to 16 years after her attorney begged for leniency. Frame's headless body was found in St. Anne about 1 month after he filed a corruption charge against the then Constable Peart. The taxi operator told the anti-corruption branch that the ex-cop tried to solicit $30,000 from him following a traffic accident involving their cars. According to the prosecution, Roxanne lured Frame from Westmoreland to St. Anne, where he was shot and beheaded. 300 Jamaican ship workers coming. As part of the government's controlled re-entry program, arrangements have been finalized for approximately 300 Jamaicans to arrive in the island by ship. The Jamaicans will arrive at Port Royal via 2 cruise vessels, Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas and the Disney Wonder, over the next 24 hours. The Jamaicans will leave the vessels on Saturday. A government multi-agency team led by a minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Senator Matthew Samuda, and supported by the relevant state agencies, including the Port Authority of Jamaica, the Jamaica Defense Force, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Jamaica Customs Agency, and the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency will process the repatriated Jamaicans. All passengers will be processed using the established protocols for testing, sensitization, and quarantine as would have obtained for all previous ship arrivals, including mandatory state quarantine until their test results are available. Bunting makes plea for private schools as Smurfs goes under. The government has been charged to offer a special subvention to private schools for the payment of teachers' salaries amid the financial fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. The opposition spokesman on education has said, based on the Ministry of Education's budgetary allocation for 2020-2021, the nation's approximately 25,000 public school teachers are to be paid 117 billion Jamaican dollars. However, Peter Bunting believes that if the country's 8,000 private school teachers were paid Jamaican $100,000 a month, it would cost the government an additional 9.6 billion Jamaican dollars. In advancing his position, during a visit to the Heinz Simonette School in Rosehall, St. James on Monday, Bunting said that private schools should be kept afloat to counterbalance the already high enrollment in public institutions. But that warning has come too late for Smurf's Early Childhood Center, whose founder and CEO Norma Reed has called it quits after 31 years of operation. Schools have been closed since March 13 because of the coronavirus restrictions, and some, like Smurfs, had become casualties of time and revenue shortfalls. I just can't manage, she said in a low tone. This is a blow. It's so hard because it's like losing a loved one. It really is hard. The center has approximately 80 students, including the infants enrolled in the daycare. But buffeted by gusty financial headwinds, Smurfs has decided to pull the plug before it was too late. Most of them should have found schools because my secretary has been busy trying to help refer them to different schools and provide them with recommendations, Reed said. Bunting believes that the contribution of private school teachers should not be slighted at this time. I think the Ministry of Education can't ignore the contribution of the private educational system. It is too significant, and you get more out of the system if the two bodies work in a complementary way rather than in an almost competitive type of way, he said. To me, during this crisis, the ministry has to support the private education institutions. Whether you pay the teachers for 6 months to a year or whatever, the timing is for normalization to take place. The Jamaica Independent Schools Association has appealed for government assistance in keeping the doors of institutions open. Reed said that Smurf's parents had expressed challenges paying fees before the pandemic and that the financial forecast was bleak. The new protocol is going to call for a lot, and I had to look at the viability of it. If you're going to have 10 children in a class with 2 teachers, how would that go, she asked. Reed has great memories of her past students and is proud of decades of achievement. A lot of them keep in touch, so that keeps me going, she said. A couple of them went to the Olympics. We have a pilot, we have lawyers and doctors as past students. Mentally ill man languishing without trial, 16 years for smashing windscreen. An elderly man who is mentally ill and who was deemed unfit to plead has been locked away between jails and prison for 16 years for smashing a windscreen. The case of Falmouth native Maurice Rassimong Small, who is believed to be in his 70s, looms large amid a justice scandal that has triggered public outrage and shame on Jamaica's political, national security and justice architecture. His case comes weeks after an independent Commission of Investigations Indicom report revealed that 81-year-old Noel Chambers, who was also deemed unfit to plead, died in January 2020 after 40 years without trial. Chambers' emaciated body was covered with bed sores, bed bugs, and vermin bites. Small, a distinct figure with flowing dreadlocks and a penchant for engaging in spirited debates about the Black Power movement, had occasionally launched unprovoked attacks on commuters in the northern parish of Trelawney. It was such an attack on a passing motor car in 2004 that landed him in the penal system. He smashed the windscreen of a motor car and he was arrested and charged with malicious destruction of property, a policeman familiar with the case said. When he went to court, he was deemed unfit to plead and has basically remained behind bars between the lockups at Ulster Spring, Clarkstown and Falmouth and the St. Catherine District Prison in Spanish Town. It is unclear how many times Small has appeared before the court, but records at the Trelawney Parish Court show that his matter was called up twice in 2019 and once this year. He is scheduled to appear in court again at the end of July. Chambers' death has become a cause célèbre for an overhaul of the incarceration of mentally ill persons, with Prime Minister Andrew Holness expressing embarrassment at the fiasco and the Chief Justice Brian Sykes issuing an unprecedented statement of regret. The Indicom report said that 7 other inmates remained behind bars for more than 40 years. Among them is 71-year-old George Williams, who faced court on Wednesday for the first time in 48 years. Former prison Dr. Raymond Notice said that while he's aware of efforts to help prisoners with mental health challenges, the stress associated with incarceration often frustrated inmates' response to treatment. Any stressful situation is going to cause a person to have a revolt into a state of unsoundness. The bigger problem is not in the prisons, it is in the jails. I don't think any treatment at all is being carried out in the jails. Notice described the series of breakdowns in the penal system as a relay. When it is not the prison, it is the court. When it is not the court, it is the police. And when it is not the police, it is the family who neglect, he said. Notice is recommending that superintendents of police in the various divisions develop protocols to deal with the treatment of such prisoners. They are not to keep them there in lockups. They are not in their sound mind and therefore cannot just be released back into society like that, said Notice. Had the Trelawney Municipal Corporation acted on a recommendation from former counsel of the Sherwood Content Division, Fernandez Smith, at the time of the incident, Small probably would not have been languishing between jails and prison facing an uncertain future. At the time of the incident, I moved a resolution in the council to get him released from lockup so that he could get the treatment he needed and then either have him reunited with his family or placed at the infirmary, said Smith. Unfortunately, after I left the council, nothing was done, and as you can see, he is now still in the penal system 16 years later. JBN, we keep you informed. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, leave us a comment, and click the notification bell to receive our daily news items.